Another CEO Wisdom Pod today with Sasha Yablonovsky. She is co-CEO at Lone Spark. Her and I talked about a bunch of interesting things last time. Sasha really got my curiosity. Sasha, can you introduce yourself? Tell us about what you do at Lone Spark.
Of course. Hi, Charles. Thanks for
Hi.
having me on. Um, about me, gosh, so many things. Well, let me start with Lone Spark. So I've left the corporate life a couple of years ago in order to start this company, Lone Spark, with my co-founder, Michael. Love what the company does, which is why I was willing to take the risk and never looked back since. What we do is we provide business lending as a service to B2B companies, and the entire mission is to really just improve how we treat SMB owners because I am one and my family has been one. And I'm sure we all know people that, start as small and medium business owners, either stay there or grow them into huge corporations, but just treating them better as humans. So that was kind of the whole mission behind it. And about me, I'm an immigrant. I moved here from the former USSR many, many years ago. And I've done a lot of different things. I, have done project management. I've ran $500 million large international companies and entities and everything in between. And now I'm a business owner and a founder.
If we dive deep in your ancestry, for example, me, I'm 25% Irish, and I still feel that craziness and that hustle mentality, and the fact that I can go for long periods of pain without budging and always hustling. I have that in my veins.
Yeah.
My ancestor, they moved and colonized Canada, so I also have that in my vein. What do you feel your ancestry and your package has in your psychology nowadays, and how you act as a CEO?
Yeah, all of those things that you just described, like the non-stop hustle is a good word, the grit behind getting everything done and never being pushed around. Like it's weird, my father was in the military, so I was raised by a colonel in, the Russian army. So I'm sure that had also to do a lot with it. But I think as an immigrant or, a person that has like a lot of different roots, you're always trying to prove yourself because that's just, the positions we're always placed in. People are always wondering what your background is, how that differs. And I feel like growing up in different countries, or even as an adult moving to different countries, you're always put in this position where you're forced to relate and forced to communicate in a certain way. So I think that just forces you to keep going and going. But I think, just my background being an immigrant definitely attributed to this whole survival instinct of how to continue to push and succeed.
How can small businesses become medium businesses and eventually become big businesses, and why is it important to grow and do so?
I don't think it's important to go from small to a large business. I think that actually, I firmly believe that you can be a small business and generate tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. It's also, how do you define a small business? Is it by size of revenues or size of team? When I think a small business, I actually think team, because I've met business owners that have 3 or 4 people and their ARR is like $57 million. But I've also met companies where they have thousands of people, but their IRR is under 10 million, right? So why is it important to grow? I think most people start a business to ensure some sort of financial and life success for themselves and their families, or just for themselves and those that might be around them. So financial motivation is always key here. So why? Survival, wanting nice things, whether you want to travel or go out or buy fancy houses or cars, that's usually the motivation, right? Whatever makes us happy, and we all define happiness differently. But I think it's just great. I think if you are in a position where you're a business owner, you have that push inside you anyways, because it's not for the weak of heart. And you know this as well as I know this. It's, you really have to be in it and dedicated. And I think, growth just naturally is something that will come to you that you'll always want to push for.
Yeah, you need to be a combination of all of the above. Coming to my own genealogy, well, my grandfather went to the Second World War. I have another grandfather that's a dentist, so somewhat intellectual and type.
Yeah.
And yet, I'm fortunate to have that. Although I don't believe that genes are that much important, because I really program myself to be gritty, to be intellectual. In the last couple of
Hmm.
years, obviously, it's a little push, but yeah, it's a very hard game, but I think it's so rewarding to see the growth on a daily basis and see
Yeah.
that spending that time in your business makes you a better human being, makes me more patient, makes me more strategic, right? Like when I
Hmm.
have puppies right now, we have 8 of them, and every time it's about planning something and executing it and being stoic about it, and then you can sit back and relax after it. So I believe
Yeah.
there's so much businesses and cross pollination that can happen between business and personal life. I want to ask you though, like you have quite an interesting background, and it seems that you have this how can I say, this desire to do good because you are working on recovering the lost monies for one of the large Ponzi scheme in history.
Good.
How did that came about, and do you feel that you have this fighter in you that's like, I'm gonna do good and I'm gonna do justice for people that were wronged?
So interesting. For me, it actually initially starts with any sort of a challenge. Like if I haven't done it before and if it's going to teach me or break me, I'm immediately attracted to it. Maybe it's because I'm a little bit of a masochist in that regard, you know? So it's like I'm immediately attracted to it. It's a bonus if it's also like measurably helping somebody, right? So, with the Ponzi scheme, I was hired by a company to put together an entire plan as to, how do these attorneys globally do electronic discovery in order to recover the monies, right? And it's never been done before. It was unprecedented. And so someone had to do it. And to me, it was like a jigsaw puzzle. Like you put it together and how do you figure it out? How do you help make this happen? And an outcome, if you're lucky, is positive, right? And it has been positive. Or in my current company at Lone Spark, it's, how do we prevent the business owners from being taken advantage of? How do we block them from all of the kind of terrible predatory practices that exist in the lending space? How do we ensure that they know the difference between good and bad debt? Because all businesses need debt, but it's just, are you taking on the kind of stuff that's going to hurt your cash flow or help it? So how do we handhold that process while automating it at the same time to make it differently and better, but leave the human in it? Not every decision can be AI made. So those are the things that drive me. Has it been done before? No. I want to try it. Has it been done before? Yes, but poorly. I want to break it and do it better. And then it's like, the bonus is like, look, it's helping the communities or it's helping the people.
Yeah, because I also see that in you with you being a member of board of directors for Little Brothers, Friends of the Elderly, Boston
Yeah.
chapter. Tell us a bit more about that one.
Okay, but that one is like truly my passion, and it has been, I don't remember for how long. I think that most countries and, communities, they really reject people after a certain age. So like post-retirement, we have a tendency to forget about the folks in our lives and in our communities. And a lot of the times when people retire, they still have so much more to give. They might not want to do the 9 to 5 anymore, but they have a lot to educate on the histories they've seen, the lives they've lived, right? And so, what this particular program, this not for profit, it connects the elderly with the younger people to kind of help educate and connect. I think that the elderly live longer when they're exposed to younger generations. It gives them this oomph, the momentum to live. And I think young people learn a lot from older people. So what ends up happening is I just think bringing them together is key. It helps both generate all generations.
Right. And I am somewhat guilty of that as a guy that's obsessed with longevity. I'm like, okay, they lost their bodies and their brains. I mean, it's lack of empathy in the end, but it's like me, I'm never gonna allow myself to lose my body and my brain like that. I'm gonna take care of myself. I'm gonna invent technology. I know that I'm unique in that fashion because I'm going to take action on it. It's one of my moonshots. But I've also seen recently interviewing 85 plus years old folks for my podcast that these guys have so much wisdom.
So much wisdom.
They bring me peace first because they've been there, they've done that, and they're like sages. You just ask them
Yeah.
questions and you know that the answer you're getting has a lot of weight just for the quantity and the quality of their experiences. So I think, like sometimes I have harsh opinions, but I try to widen my stance and have a diverse array of guests here so that I can, yeah, like have better
Yeah.
conclusions.
Yeah, because the way I think about it is everything we're doing today, it's hard, but it also is easier in a lot of ways because we have so much technology that's supporting us, right? So your company does lead gen for businesses and business owners. It's not a new concept. Before computers were invented, people were lead generating as well, just differently, right? And a lot of the ways we can say it used to be harder back then because you didn't have technology, so it was slower. And I think those that have experienced that world have tips and tricks for us today that we then implement and, 10x it, 100x it with technology. So I agree with you 100%. I think there is a lot of wisdom there. And ultimately, most of the things that we're doing are not brand new. They're just evolved and we're doing it better, right? So I think it helps to listen to those that have done it before, even if they've done it differently.
First question, what do you think of the word power women, and do you identify yourself with it?
I don't like anything that separates women and men in that way. I just think power leader I associate with, not because I don't associate as a woman or don't call myself a woman. I just believe in things being not labeled in that way. And I might be unique in this way. So, like, I don't like it when companies announce, we have a female CEO. I just think it should be, we have a new CEO and her name is. Like, that's just where kind of my mentality comes from. So, do I associate with being a power woman? I'm not sure. I associate with being a power leader. I associate with being a good leader and a powerful presence in the room. Um, Bonus, I guess, that I'm a woman. Not a lot of us out there, but I don't think about it in men versus women terms like
Yeah,
that.
there's pros and cons into classifying things. I think like as we go, yeah, it's a tough question to see if we will classify things more or less in this future. I
I
think we will
think
classify less.
Yeah,
In
and I agree because I think like the more we classify, the more it makes it feel like an anomaly. Like the more you keep saying woman CEO or power woman or women in leadership, like I just think it keeps reminding us that it's an anomaly. For me, I think if we want to normalize it, normalize women being in the boardroom, normalize women being in leadership positions, we should just speak about it like it's a normal thing.
Yeah, I somewhat agree. I think though that yeah, it can help with demographics and science and making some conclusions. Although the 1%, like the top, it's always hard to classify them. They're so unique and weird. But where I was getting with that is that I interview various women for my pod, and every time I talk about where their ambition comes from, they don't have a clear answer. It's almost like if they want to avoid it. I think that last time that we spoke, you and I also asked you a similar question. And is it like fraud upon to say that you're a woman and you want you're ambitious and you want power and resources? Is this like a thing that is can bring lashback to your career, or what do you feel about that?
No, I think it's the opposite. But also, again, like my parents didn't raise me like do this as a girl or do this, because you're a girl. It was always like do this because you can. And this was back in Russia, mind you, like in the 70s and 80s. So my parents were great about raising me, not like a boy or like a girl, just raising me as a person that should go out and get. So I've always been very ambitious. I've never been embarrassed of it. I'm actually like, I speak often about being very transparent to anybody you talk to, whether it's a man or a woman, about the things you want, why you want them, and what your path to get it is, because I think it might help those around you that are less clear about it, because we're all motivated by something. Just because your motivation might be different than my motivation doesn't mean it's wrong, right? Or right. It's what drives you. So I'm ambitious because there's certain things I must have in order to be happy. I must travel and I'm a big food snob and I must dine out. I love to travel the world and eat at the best restaurants. In order to do that, to afford that, you need certain finances, right? In order to do that. So for me, it's like I'm not interested in bags and shoes, and I'm not stereotyping because there's men that are interested in bags and suits, right? So I'm not interested in those kind of materialistic things. All of my investments go into experiences. So my ambition pushes me into experiences and pushing my children to do the same thing because I think that's more important as a life lesson. So that's where my ambitions come from. It's not because I want to be the first CEO. It's not because I want to be on the board of directors. Like it's just those are stepping stones that expose me to great learnings and experiences that ultimately get me to travel, get me to the experiences I want to buy for myself and my family.
Do you or can you fully disconnect when you're at the restaurant and when you're traveling? Can you fully enjoy the moment? Because it used to cost me a lot to do that when I started.
Yeah. So the answer is yes. Now, it took me many years to figure out how to do that. And I think I successfully started to do it about 4 years ago, when I could literally just say no and enough and you're done. So when I started taking, when I was taking vacations over the last 4 years, like I truly disconnected. Um, and sometimes people get upset about that, but I just think boundaries are important. The reason why I paused when I said yes to you, Charles, is because I'm also now a business owner and I don't have a huge team that I'm able to delegate to, which I'm sure you can relate to. So now it's a tougher balance, full disconnection. But I'll tell you, although I'm not able to fully disconnect and travel right now because my company is still so young, it's 2 years old. I am able to disconnect after a certain time in the evening fully. Like I won't answer the phone, I won't respond to emails, and I won't respond to work related texts. It also, I think, sets a proper expectation with your customers that that is not the time to reach out.
What's your philosophy when it comes to loan, and do you use them yourself personally and as a business owner? And if so, what's your strategy to stay financially healthy?
As a business owner, our business is bootstrapped. It doesn't happen overnight. My partner and I, we planned on this for many years in order to bootstrap and launch this company. It wasn't like a on a whim thing that happens. Um, I think that taking out loans for businesses is an important thing. If you need to do it, I don't think you should wait until it's too late. You should do it early on before you run out of cash. And it shouldn't be an emergency because then you end up being in a situation where you're being taken advantage of and your rates are too high and it all ends up kind of backfiring. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Good debt is good. On the consumer side, like us personally, I think most of us have taken on debt when we paid for our colleges, right? And your credit card is technically debt. You borrow money against and then you pay it back. So I think same thing, like in businesses and personal life, as long as you're responsible with it, you try to, right? You use it as backup or you use it as a need. But again, don't put yourself in a situation where your back is behind the wall and then you're stuck getting a credit card that's super high interest rate or getting a business loan that's super high interest rate because that ends up hurting you.
Right. I would advise folks before they get a loan to have that scientific mindset and understand how to experiment in business. So let's say that you get a $10,000 loan, maybe you can do 10 experiment of 1K each, and probably one will lead you to hypergrowth. And once you do, then you can double down on that one and stop the others. You don't necessarily need to be technically or financially savvy when you borrow money, but you need to have various experiments, and understand these laws of the physics of business, kind of, and see what works and what doesn't. Do you operate on that mindset as well?
We do, but we really encourage business owners to do a lot of research. I know it's hard. As a business owner, you have to research a lot of things, vendors, price comparisons, how to generate your leads, how to convert your leads, what kind of ingredients to use in your restaurant, if that's what, like, we always have to think about these things. Financial health of your business is one of the most critical things. I think we all know that more than 80% of businesses go out of business because of financial cash flow issues within the first several years of launch. And it's really unfortunate. So, yes, one more thing to do, if your company doesn't offer lending as a service, like what we do for them, or if you're not working with a trusted financial advisor that's able to seek that out, do not just jump in. You have to do the research on the rates and the terms, understand differences between different types of business loans to understand if you need something long-term, short-term. Try not to put your personal house as a collateral ever. I see that happening all the time, and it's most of the time not necessary. And by the way, very, very risky. Just avoid that.
Stressful, very
Very
stressful.
stressful.
And I think people need to reason more in terms of stress as well. Like level one is thinking in money. Level two is thinking in time. Oh, I don't have time for this, and I'm fully booked all the time. Level three is thinking in terms of energy. If you have your house as a collateral, the stress cost will be humongous. You'll be a wreck. You won't sleep. So people need to think about that. Last question for you, Sasha.
Yeah.
The current economic environment, how should people adapt to it? What's your take on that?
Plan ahead. The lenders and banks are very cautious in the way that they're lending and using money for businesses or even for consumers today. They're doing a lot more research on the heels of, what happened in 2020. So my biggest advice is plan ahead and don't be afraid to ask questions. Talking to people about money is not shameful. I think it's like a big thing that doesn't happen often enough. Ask other business owners if they've been in debt. What is the difference between good and bad debt? If they're bootstrapped, how they were able to do that. If they gave up equity for investors, what were the best practices? Ask questions. It does not mean you don't know. It just means that you need to know better and you're making educated decisions. Do not be shamed about talking finances.
Love it. And yeah, my last podcast was with a French guy, and the American culture is no shame. Back there, they're really ashamed to talk about money. So that's a good thing about the US and yeah, the North American culture if you want. So thank you so much for today. By the way, a quick plug, if people want to ask questions and don't know where to start your podcast. You can record these episodes and ask people whatever you want. It's a good pretext. It's a very good strategy. Thank you so much for the value you shared today, Sasha. Where can people find out more about you and LoanSpark?
On LinkedIn, you can find me. I'm only Sasha Yablonovsky on LinkedIn. I've looked. And LoanSpark is also on LinkedIn, and you can go to loanspark.com online.
All right, there